Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I'm a little disturbed that we don't have very many people in the classroom right now. And I'm probably more disturbed than I was before because I looked at your papers. A lot of people, first off, about half the students have not sent in their papers. The short assignment that we had yesterday, which only had to include 3 sentences. Most of you wrote more than 3 sentences, but the assignment really only needed 3 to 5 sentences. And that's one of the things I will go over today about why only 3 to 5. But half the class didn't send anything in at all, and many of those who did sent them in very late. This was supposed to be an in-class assignment, and the products that I've seen, most of them were not very good. Let me just be blunt about it. I'm not sure where, I know some of you are quite a ways into your journalism program, which would cause me to be more concerned. Some of you perhaps are not. I'm not sure how to what degree you're kept together in this sort of a class, and how much you're here as an elective. But anyway, I'm concerned. Probably if your project 2 reflects what I saw today, I would be pretty kind to give most of the people that handed theirs in a C. I'd be really kind to do that. There are some outstanding ones, or at least, well, compared to the rest, definitely, I would have some A's, but there wouldn't be a lot of them, what I saw from this very short assignment. Of course, it could be that the first few paragraphs are not going to be your best paragraphs, but actually in reality, those should be. That's why, and sometimes when I teach, sometimes when I use this critique sheet, I put the lead at 40%. The start of your story is so important. If you don't do a good start of your story, people aren't going to read it. It's the start that draws their attention. To some degree, the headline, which you don't. I'd say most newspapers, the writers don't write the headline, at least not in America. Sometimes I have asked my students to write the headline thinking that it would get them to think a little bit harder about how they should write the lead. But sometimes when I do that, then they get confused and they think the headline is the lead, and that's not the case. The headline may reflect the lead, but the lead is a complete sentence, and the headline is not a complete sentence. The headline is, well, it's like if you were to look at this, the news report critique sheet is the headline, and that's, headlines only have a few words, so they're not complete sentences. So sometimes my students, even in America, have gotten confused when I've asked them to write a headline and the lead, because they get confused between what's what. Anyway, the bottom line is we need to talk about this, and I need some people to listen. And I need to slow down my speech, apparently, because a lot of you apparently aren't understanding me, which, has been a problem not just for our courses, but a lot of courses here and at Chimon, is that a lot of you may be able to pass a test in English, but you're having a hard time understanding American English, international English, let me put it that way, my English or anybody outside of your neighborhood, basically. So that's a problem. A lot of pretty bad grammar, but I'm not as concerned about that as I am. In Kazakhstan, I face the same sort of problem. The typical students' native language is either Kazakh or Russian. And so we even started some new classes just in their native languages so they could be prepared to go into a career in their country, because many of them, even if they were all really good students, if their English was really good and their grammar was perfect, probably somebody in Kazakhstan is not going to get an international job. Not very many of them are going to get an international job where they're going to be expected to do all the writing in English. Some would, but not. The majority would not. Just a numbers game. There won't be that many openings for them. But on the other hand, I do have students who are working professionally in America from Kazakhstan. So they did learn enough to get there and do it. But they also have, they worked on their English a lot longer, and they went to America and did some other stuff in preparation for a career there. And so they're doing pretty well. But again, we recognized at that university that most people would not. And so we had some classes just in their language, in their native language, so that they could get a job locally. So when I graded them there, I very frequently, I didn't ignore the grammar. I had to count the grammar and spelling some, but I didn't count it a lot. I mean, even in this, I guess I do, language, I have 20% in this one. I've had some, depending on the course, I may even reduce it a little bit. But even at 20%, if your spelling and grammar isn't great, that's not going to kill you. But you need to understand this other stuff. You need to understand how to write the lead. You need to understand how to handle attribution. And even part of this language is about attribution. So you need to understand that. You need to, understand the other concepts that are taught here. Even if your spelling and grammar is not great in English, that's not going to kill you with this critique sheet. And so, as in Kazakhstan, I'm trying to ignore some of that, presuming those of you who have the worst English grammar are not going to try to get a job where you have to do regular output in English. So at least not, not in writing. Maybe you can, perform some other functions with your English, maybe whatever, but you're not going to be a journalist in English in most cases. There are some of you that have the capability of doing it. You need some work. I have, and maybe I'll go ahead and let me think here. I'll probably put these onto Moodle. I will put them on Moodle just so you kind of get maybe a better idea to compare what you're doing with professionals, at least in American professionals. But for example, here are 30 of the top newspapers in America, and I'm just going to randomly select some here to give you a little bit better idea what an American professional would look like in what they're doing. And I will go ahead and copy this whole folder over into Moodle. So if you want to take some time to look at it, obviously these are available really on the internet. These are a little bit old now. I made these 8 years ago, but journalism hasn't changed a whole lot in between. So just grabbing just a couple of these just to make my point. Let me see, get one where we can see the whole thing. Okay, we'll try to blow this up. Where is lower upper? Yeah, let me blow it up this way, I guess. Okay, so these are not interview-based stories, but I still can make some points with this. It'd be better if I could find interview-based stories for you to, to make my point, but they're not going to necessarily be here. We'll find some. So first off, to point out, over in the upper right, the Georgia Department of Transportation said Tuesday it spent nearly $1 billion last budget year on road projects and related costs, rejecting a contention that the agency has been stifling job creation in Georgia's beleaguered construction industry. Okay, what to learn from the lead? And this is totally random. This is not a great lead, by the way. I don't think. I would have turned this around and said, the Georgia Department of Transportation is not stifling job creation and Georgia's beleaguered construction industry. It says its former commissioner, Vance Smith, they spent, having spent nearly $1 billion on road construction in the last year, whatever it said. I try to get a little bit more of the whammy to the front. That is the part that's interesting. The interesting part of this lead is not the Georgia Department of Transportation said Tuesday it spent nearly. You get, like 10 words into it and you've gotten to nothing interesting. So I would have turned this around. I'm the editor. He's the reporter. I get to turn it around because that's my job. I'm the editor. Yeah, I mean, not in this one, but, that would be my role. And so I would rewrite that lead. But my point is, it is two things. First off, many of you wrote leads that had more than one sentence. As we go through and we look at a few of these, you will not find, I don't know, we might stumble onto one that has more than one sentence. But if I looked at 100 of them, 100 stories in American newspapers, the lead is almost always one sentence. We might find one out of 100 that is more than one sentence. So that's one of the things that is in the critique sheet, and for some reason people have not understood that my explanation. They've not taken the time to translate the critique sheet or anything that would help them understand how I'm going to grade your papers. A lead is one sentence. That's it, one sentence. Ideally, you make it as powerful as you can to get people's attention. As I said, I don't think that one does that. I don't think this lead is very powerful. And frankly, a lot of journalism students in America, I don't think, are taught properly how to write a lead. And a lot of professionals don't think they are either. That's been one of my main areas of research. Is I have surveyed well over 1,000 executives who almost unanimously say that students of American journalism programs are not taught correctly. So it's not just my opinion. Other editors are saying the same thing. So anyway, in this case, then, second paragraph. See, this looks long to you because it's, like I say, it's so narrow. The columns are so narrow. But how many sentences does paragraph 2 have? It has 2 sentences. One sentence, that first sentence in the paragraph 2 would have been long enough to make you think this is a fairly long paragraph. This is a 2-sentence paragraph. You should not, the very maximum is three sentences in a paragraph. But you can see already with a 2-sentence paragraph, this looks like a long paragraph. You get to 3 sentences, a lot of your readers will not read it. They will see it as being, they don't have to read a newspaper. They read a newspaper because they want to read a newspaper. And if it looks at all foreboding, looks too tedious, they just don't do it. And so the whole reason why we have short paragraphs is, again, that's a 2-sentence paragraph and it looks long. You add 3, it's going to look too long. So 2 is fine. 3, if they're this long, if it has that long of a sentence in it, 3 is too long. In the critique sheet, I say 3 is okay. But this is a demonstration why it's not always okay. This looks long and it's 2 sentences. Third paragraph is also, well, we haven't finished it yet, but so far all we see is 1 sentence and a start of a second one. So most paragraphs, a lot of you had like 5, 6 sentences, and I've told you not to do that. You apparently did not understand me, but paragraphs need to be no longer than 3 sentences. There would be a very, very, very rare exception in American journalism or international journalism in general where you would go over 3 sentences in a paragraph. They would have to be very, very short sentences, or very, very bad journalist, one or the other. Well, we just go to another newspaper so we can see just some different options. I'm not going to do the New York Times, although it probably is okay, but the New York Times sometimes breaks all the rules, and they kind of thumb their nose at everybody. We're better than everybody else. We don't have to keep the rules. And so I'm not even going to look at them. Here's one from where I have my home in America now. Not where I grew up, but I did buy a home there the last time I was there. And even though it's one of the smaller newspapers I put on this, it actually is one of the better ones. They actually keep rules. So, again, I guess I'm going to go up here. And can I drag this over? Okay. Okay. I'll just round a little bit. Okay, short lead, relatively short. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. So it's definitely within the range that I would give you. The other one's probably too long. The first one I showed you is probably over 35 words. Again, I don't think that's best practices. I try to teach you guys best practices, not average or even below average practices. This is within the range of what I would consider best practices. The NCAA on Tuesday more than doubled the self-imposed penalties for the Boise State football program and cited the athletic department for a lack of institutional control. So this is, to them, this is from Boise. This is where the Idahoan exist, and their local university is very important to them. Their football program has been successful, and that's very important to them. So having penalties from the National Collegiate Association is bad news for them. It'll hurt their program. And so that's why it's actually the very top story to them. Probably, it wouldn't be at other newspapers. Going down here, this is even a shorter lead. U.S. Army Sergeant Devin Daniels returned to Idaho from Afghanistan Tuesday afternoon. Frankly, that is a terrible lead. That is a so what lead. There's nothing in that lead that'll make you watch it unless you or to read it unless you know something about the story already. In this case, it's because they probably do already know the story. He's returning dead. Okay, so that's the point. And maybe they should have put in a casket in the lead, because that's what they revealed in paragraph 2. He was coming home in a casket. So I would rewrite that lead too if I was the editor. But it's short. You get the idea. One short paragraph. They're presuming people know. You see all these next 2 paragraphs are short too. Even though there's 2 sentences in the second paragraph. At Boise's Gowan Field, his family circled the flag-draped casket he will be buried in. Daniels, 22, was killed August 25th by a roadside bomb. Paragraph 3 is 1 sentence. Standing near Daniel's wife, Samantha, and 7-year-old daughter, Olivia, was Chaplain Major Rob Morris. He read from 1 Corinthians 15. Okay, so there's 2 sentences again in that one, but they are, again, very short sentences. But you see, even these short sentences in narrow columns, they look okay. They don't look weird that they're only one sentence because the columns are so narrow. So that's what I've been trying to teach you is narrow, because of narrow columns, we need to keep our paragraphs short. Three sentences could look too long. And so you kind of need to get a sense of, think about the graphic impact. A journalist always has to think, I already told you, I want you to take your own pictures, your own photos, get some art to go with your story. Art is so important. This is a graphic impact too. And the reason why we want short paragraphs is for graphic impact. These are short paragraphs. Their graphic impact is much better. It's less foreboding, less problematic reading these than this one over here in the same paper was not written by them. It was written by Associated Press. And so this is, here's the exception. Very rare, but this is actually a 3-sentence lead. Very unusual in American newspapers. And it looks long. And it's going to lose readership because it looks long. And because it's 3 sentences. That's not how they should have been taught to write journalism. So they'll lose readers because of that. That's been shown scientifically. Long leads lose readers. We want the lead short. So you see an exception, but most are not. Most of these, if you go through these different newspapers, most of them will have 1-sentence paragraphs. Maybe just look at one more, again, randomly. This one is from my area also in Portland, Oregon. Find some way to get over there. Okay, first off, get rid of that, I guess. There it is. Okay, it's hardly news for those pounding the pavement, but state economists confirmed Tuesday that hiring in Oregon remains stagnant, mimicking its listless national job market that can't seem to get off the couch. Okay, so it's a long sentence, but it's 1 sentence. And it's relatively, even though we talked earlier about trying to avoid compound sentences, again, sentences that could grammatically be cut into more than one and be better, because of the rule in America, and it is in international journalism that we do 1-sentence leads. Sometimes the leads end up being a little more complex. Read it very carefully and make sure that you don't get lost. If you read a paragraph as an editor or as reading your own stuff and you suddenly can't figure out, let me see, how's this supposed to flow, then you better rewrite it. This is long, but it's fairly clear despite being a compound sentence. So again, the second paragraph here is 2 sentences. Again, the state employment. So this one gives the rest of the lead, so to speak. And by the way, not all American universities teach the idea of the complete lead, and so they don't all. And those journalists that went to universities that did not teach the concept of a complete lead, that is, take 2 paragraphs to basically explain the 5 W's, that's where those students who went to a different university that didn't teach that tend to have longer leads. Because the whole idea of the complete lead is let's shorten up the first paragraph because we can include the other 5 W's in paragraph 2. So that's the concept behind it, which I endorse because, again, science says people will stop reading if they don't like the lead. And so we want the lead to be as powerful as possible and get on to and give other basic information in paragraph 2. So the state employment department said Tuesday that Oregon's seasonally adjusted unemployment rate nudged up to 9.6% in August, essentially unchanged from 9.5% in July. Meanwhile, the U.S. seasonally adjusted unemployment rate remained at 9.1% in August. David Cook, an economist with the Oregon, that next paragraph is an indirect quote, but they finally get to an actual. The first paragraph had an attribution, but it's kind of general attribution. The state economist confirmed, and so their first real attribution. I guess they stayed. So they attributed again a kind of a vague attribution in paragraph 2. They have attribution in each paragraph, but the first one that gives an actual name is paragraph 3. And that's called a blind lead, and that's okay. A blind lead is one where you give an attribution, but you don't give a name for the attribution. So, to say, the state economist confirmed, or the Oregon, the state unemployment department said. So those are blind without specific name to attribute to. So the first specific name is in paragraph 3. Blind leads that have kind of vague attributions, okay. It can shorten up your lead also sometimes. And so that's one purpose. And another purpose is, for example, who knows David Cook? Nobody knows David Cook. Out of all the readers that read the story, his family knows David Cook, basically, and his friends and neighbors. But the average person reading this story does not know who David Cook is, so his name doesn't matter to them. So a blind lead about, the state economists say is adequate because that's what's important. You want some authority behind it. The state economists say this. The fact that it's David Cook is irrelevant. That can be held till paragraph 3. No problem. While we're here, we'll look at one more here. If I can get over there. This is from the New York Times. So New York Times tends to write longer leads. It's old school, and so it does not abide by the idea of a complete lead, of a two-sentence lead or a two-paragraph lead. Another 2.6 million people slipped into poverty in the United States last year, the Census Bureau reported Tuesday, and the number of Americans living below the official poverty line, for 46.2 million people, was the highest number in the 52 years the Bureau has been publishing figures on it. Another thing that you should notice, however, that most of these, a lead should include some news. Some of your leads were very vague. There wasn't anything there to catch somebody's interest. So people read a newspaper ideally to read news. That's why they call it a newspaper, is they're looking for news. That doesn't mean there's not some feature stories. There are. But by and large, we try to find a news angle and emphasize in the lead a news angle for it, such as this one does. Okay, well, I will put these onto Moodle so you can look at some others, although, again, you can find them pretty easily on the internet. But it's important that you understand what the standards are for international journalism. That's how, if nothing else, that's how I'm going to grade you. So even if in your country or in your community they don't keep the international standards, in this class I do, and I'm one grading the project too. And so these are, I don't teach something that's not an international standard. I think I teach the best practices of the international standards, but they're still within the range of international standards. You do not see, as I said, we found out of 5, we did find one that had 2 sentences. But that's rare. If we looked at another 20, we probably wouldn't find another one. We just had the good luck of finding one that was 2 sentences, a 2-sentence lead, but that's very uncommon in American newspapers. And I would bet that writer did not graduate from a journalism program. Typically, when we find people writing more than, putting more than one sentence in a lead, is because they graduated in English or something, maybe in political science, some other area, but they still got a job in journalism. They are smart. They have some good attributes, but they don't keep the rules of journalism as much. So we see those once in a while. And that's, I would guess, I would say there's at least probably more than a 50% chance that the writer that used the two-sentence lead was not a journalism graduate. So again, looking at my example on the critique sheet, here's two paragraphs. Okay, the first one is one sentence. The second one is it's three sentences, but they're relatively short sentences. But if I put that, that second paragraph into the 2-inch column that's typical of newspapers, it would look a little bit long. But my rule is you can have three sentences, and so that is a three-sentence lead, or a three-sentence second paragraph, and making the complete lead. So again, the lead was just simply, marketing and PR in the 21st century are undergoing dramatic changes, says David W. Guth, an American public relations expert visiting Malaysia. Again, I mentioned this this is a speech interview lead. I suggested that you all write speech interview leads yesterday, and probably 90% of you did not. You took more of an approach like it wasn't journalistic, let me put it that way. You did not take a journalistic approach to your stories. You kind of like you were telling a story, and it's not really, I'll show you what I mean, but it's not a journalistic approach. Paragraph 2 then, as I said, in best practice, what I feel is best practices in international journalism, then answer some of the other 5 W's. So now we have here 4 paragraphs answering the 5 W's, so we don't have to feel like paragraph 1 has to be very long. And so again, not all universities in America teach that. I'm totally convinced it's best practices, so we can keep the lead short and still put the 5 W's, or at least the ones we're going to cover, at the top of the page. That's the top of the story. So paragraph 2, Guth was the keynote speaker for the conference, The Decline of Mass Marketing and the Rise of Consumer-Focused Marketing at China University, Malaysia on June 15th. Speakers at the conference also explained how mobile technology is quickly providing broadband internet access to the most remote villages around the globe, which is having a major impact on PR marketing as well as on world cultures. So that combination of sentences does a very good job of giving the 5 W's, and yet the lead is short and to the point. And to somebody interested in PR marketing, it should be of interest to them. We don't even pretend that every story is going to interest everybody. And so, if you're under that delusion, you should not be under that delusion. Newspapers every story is not going to attract every reader. And so our lead and our headline will do the best job they can to tell the reader what this story is about so they don't waste their time. And they will still try to make them as interesting as possible to increase their readership. Obviously, they want as many readers for every story as they can, so let's write them well. Let's not make them boring, but not everybody's into PR marketing, for example, in this case. Okay, so let's go to some examples. I took off names so that hopefully you won't be embarrassed about it. I never considered putting the writer's name on it, but since you knew how you paired up and stuff, I took the subject of the story also off, unless I made a mistake along the way, so that you could remember, aha, I know who that person is. So you may be able in some cases figure that out. But so-and-so, XXX, fell in love with Pokemon the first time she saw her brother play it, and keeps this love for many years. Um, that's not a bad lead. It's not a speech interview lead, but it's not a bad lead. It does make you wonder. I mean, it's not a news lead. That is definitely a feature lead. So it's not, but somebody into that sort of stuff might read it, even though it's kind of vague. It doesn't. It is, like I said, a feature lead. Lead. Um, Paragraph 2. When she was about 6 years old, the game attracted her immediately by one action that her brother, I think that's supposed to be manipulated, the character to the lawn and found a Pokemon ball. Anyway, so on, so on. So it's this one is 4 sentences, too long. Put that into a narrow column. It's going to look foreboding. So we want to cut that down a little bit. Oops, I didn't. Sometimes these slides kind of jump on you. What I asked you to do was to make paragraph 3 a direct quote, which was kind of the formula I gave you for writing a story quickly and effectively, was to have a direct quote that would reflect what you put in the lead. There's no direct quote here, obviously. There's some bad grammar in it. Again, I'm not as, and some inconsistent spelling. I don't know what was available to the writer to write about. This appears to be the main part of the interview. Whether it should have been is another question. I can't really judge that from reading what was presented to me. I don't know whether there was something more interesting. So I have to take it at face value that this is the best we have. So anyway, let's go on to the second one. Blank is a Chinese girl. 3 years ago, she came to Malaysia to study unexpectedly. She loved, again, some grammatic problems, Malaysia. She likes Malaysian people, and she and her Malaysian friends have many wonderful times together. Multiple sentences in the lead, a little bit vague. A lot of the leads were like this. Whether or not that really is the most powerful thing you could find to write about, to say, here, read this story. I have let me say, if that was it, I think this one you could have done a better job of interviewing. If that's the most important thing, the most interesting thing you found, that is, like at best, paragraph 2 stuff, at best. Give the background to the person. Even in paragraph 2, there was looking at the direct quotes that were provided, I think your lead is something more like, so and so. If you want to start with a name, again, it's not a speech interview lead, but so and so did not want to come to Malaysia when she, but now loves living in the country or whatever. So you at least create some sort of a contrast, some sort of conflict. You're trying to figure out, okay, why did she not want to come? So you have something there that other than, the lead does suggest it, but it kind of buries it. Unexpectedly is not the same as saying you didn't want to come. So I'd get more into, I don't know if you say she hated the idea of coming to Malaysia, but make it as strong as you can to create this kind of conflict. And maybe we need to find out, did you ask, how was it that she more or less was forced to come? So there's definitely should be some more questions there. Hopefully you asked the questions, but they're not here in the story of how was it that she felt forced to come to Malaysia. Just the fact that she felt that way, that's interesting, but why? That begs that question. Remember I said the why question? If you didn't ask the why question, then you felt in your reporting. Why did she not want to come to Malaysia? How was it that she felt forced to come to Malaysia? There's more questions there. Whether or not they're in your notes, I don't know, but they would help you maybe find a little bit stronger whammy. Nonetheless, this is probably better than some of the other stories. Recently, a Chinese Mary Sue teleplay named "I Only Love You" gains popularity in teenager group, which caused many students stay up late to watch it during the night, especially girls and female. Is there a difference between girls and female? I didn't know there was. Okay. We don't want to be redundant. So one is good enough. This is, it may be, I mean, the essence of a lead might be there, but maybe it's something like, Chinese students are staying up, Chinese students, especially girls, are staying up late to watch a Chinese, I'm not sure what Chinese Mary Sue, if that doesn't mean anything to me. Teleplay. So I don't put in words that, let me just say this, don't put in words that aren't needed. We want to, especially in the lead, we want to pare it down to as short and tight as possible. I'm kind of confused here. It says the kind of teleplay which was called Mary Sue by some people. Okay. It kind of explains it a little bit, but probably you could leave that part out of the lead. And recently, you can probably replace that. Again, has gained popularity or something. Recently can kind of be implied without actually using the word. Because actually, when you say recently, you're kind of saying, well, you're kind of, you start wondering what recently means, like put that way. It's a very vague time element, and in some ways you're better off not even mentioning it, and just has gained or something is fine, and leave that time element out altogether. About this phenomenon, she said, if you can balance your study and your daily life, it is beneficial for you, but if you cannot control yourself, you will face some troubles. See, that sentence, that quote by itself might suggest a different type of lead. It's causing, many of the Chinese students are staying up late, and for some, it's affecting their studies. So now, because you're implying that anyway, that you've got at least the possibility of it affecting their studies is down here. And so that might actually make it a pretty good news lead if you can get that up to the front. Where am I here? So you don't have to move very far, suddenly it jumps the whole slide. So you might actually, find, if you look through your quotes, you want to find that idea that is newsworthy. That's what I was wanting you to do, is find something that was newsworthy and not too vague. And so in this case, it may be not only are they staying up late, but it might be affecting their studies. And then you have a good, I mean, it might still be considered a news feature, but it had more newsworthiness to it, let me put it that way. So this one has some potential. It's a pretty good story, actually. But I think the lead is burying the whammy. We're not finding the whammy soon enough. Going vegetarian is both close to and far away from people's daily life, says so-and-so, a college student at China University, Malaysia. I have no idea what that's saying. Close to and far away from. Maybe that translates into Chinese or something better, but it doesn't make any sense to me. Try to get to the point, try to be clear what you're saying, don't be too vague. Goes on and explains that this person, did go to camp or something, one-day camp on vegetarianism, but didn't feel like it was something that she could institute in her own life here at Shyman. It might well be kind of difficult, I would say. You can, so I think you need to look at, a little bit better way of catching the attention anyway, because it's just too far to have a whammy. It's too so something, so like maybe something like going vegetarian is enticing to so-and-so, but she says being a student at China University, Malaysia, makes it difficult to do in her daily, to add to her daily routine or something. Maybe get a little bit more information, a little more of that conflict. I'd like to, but yeah, it doesn't work out very well. Maybe get to why she likes the idea. But I kind of like the idea of the setting up the conflict again of wanting to do it but not being able to do it. So you have a little bit of conflict there. Might be the best way to approach it. But this is just too vague. Going vegetarian is both close to and far away. I have no idea what that means. You need to be more clear in your writing. But on the better side, frankly, a lot of people did not use any quotes at all. This person got some quotes, did cover some interesting ideas. A little bit of rewriting, I'd say, could make this, depending on the rest of the information you have, could make this a pretty good story. And so it does have some news value buried into it a little bit. This is one of the few leads that is a speech interview lead, and so that's good. By and large, this is done the way I asked it to be done. In that sense, it has a speech interview lead, then has a paragraph 2 that fills in most of the other 5 W's, has a direct quote at paragraph 3, which is what I asked for. So, actually, this one, out of all those that I received, probably get one of the better grades, because at least she was trying to do what I asked her to do, and a lot of people fell a long way short in doing that. Yes, she could have improved the lead. That much I would say. So-and-so who comes from such and such province, China, majors in journalism. No. There's no whammy in that at all. See, that is and then it's still the lead isn't done. So we have a 3-sentence lead, which we don't want to do, but it also there's no whammy there. You have to find a whammy. You have to look through your notes and find a whammy. He enrolled in 2016 and will graduate this year. During the 3 years of study, he became a professional photographer through constant practice and practice. There's no lead there. There's nothing strong in that lead to get somebody to say, here, read me. That's what your lead should do. You're kind of waving at the readers, here, come read me. That has no news value into it, nothing to attract somebody's attention. And so as we go down, however, I mean, you may make somebody mad, but you can't worry about that here. In paragraph 2, now we have a whammy. I would rather be an advertiser than a journalist, because advertising has more specific business purpose, and there will be no fake news because it is false indeed. Okay, very strong opinion here that journalism is not the best major for this student. Don't be afraid. I mean, maybe if you're actually writing this for our newspaper, you might feel a little bit shy to do that because, oh, Cheng Song's going to hate me. Dr. Ken's going to hate me for saying this. No, don't worry about that. Give us a good story. And so the story here is there's a real whammy here. This has a real good whammy. May not be one that our department wants to hear, but that's not your job to worry about that. Your job is to write good stories. And so the whammy is in paragraph 2. So that direct quote should probably be, that's in paragraph 2, should probably be in paragraph 3. Your lead should be something that like journalism includes so much fake news that so-and-so would rather wishes he had majored in advertising rather than journalism at Chapman University, whatever. So get to the point, and then you tell a little more background. You can say, you know, probably it doesn't matter even in paragraph 2 which province he came from. Probably paragraph 2 could have that he's from China, but the province doesn't really matter. If that came in someplace, that'd be later in the story, and maybe no place. I'm not sure the province matters. I mean, unless there's some meaning to that I don't get, the province may not be in the story at all. So, you know, think about what you have in there. It is relevant that he's about to graduate, and he came to Chapman before there was an advertising major. There is one now. And that can probably be pointed out in the story so that Cheng Song isn't quite so upset with you. Because we now have that offer. You can major in advertising. So that could be part of the story, that he wishes that when he had started at Chapman that there had been an advertising major or whatever. So there's this one has a lot of potential, I think, to be an interesting story, very relevant, and obviously has some pretty strong feelings. So there's some more questions to be asked. If you become a journalist, down here in the next paragraph, you must consider some propaganda purposes and media ownership. I mean, probably he doesn't want to be so overt as to suggest that his home country doesn't give you a lot of freedom in journalism. As opposed, as you see in America, the journalists can say anything they want to about the president of the United States, and he can do nothing at all. He's helpless to defend himself practically, because in many cases the major media in America only quote him when they want to make fun of him. They do not actually sit down and talk to somebody very often, the major liberal media, about why he feels kind of betrayed by the media, because they don't want to hurt their own PR, and so the newspapers kind of ignore that part of the story. But what is good about what you can learn from that is that media is not at all controlled by American newspapers, or by American, media is not controlled by American government. I mean, they're trying to destroy Trump, and they before that they tried to destroy Bush. They loved Obama, and no matter what Obama did, they ignored it. He did all sorts of bad stuff that they ignored, including wiretapping journalists. It's generally been true that the government in America has not wiretapped journalists, and they sought, in order to get the wiretap, they had to tell the court that the journalist was a co-conspirator in acquiring secret documents, even though he was just a regular journalist. He was not somebody like WikiLeaks that hacks into the government servers and stuff. just a regular journalist. And that was the first time any president has ever done that before. And so for like 2 days, they've expressed some outrage that he would do that, but he did lots of stuff that the media ignored because he's one of them. He's a liberal. But they just practically destroyed Bush and trying to do the same thing to Trump. So, the government has no control, essentially no control over the media in America. So, when you try to compare the freedom of journalists in China and the journalists in America, there is certainly a stark contrast. That doesn't mean that, like I say, I'm very critical of the media in America because I think they're doing a bad job and they're being unfair and so forth. But there's nothing President Trump can do about it under American law. There's nothing. And so he's in most countries, especially developing countries, the people most protected by law are people who are powerful. In America, the people most protected by laws such as invasion of privacy and libel and stuff like that are the people who are not strong. If you make a mistake and say that I was arrested for whatever it might be, and it's not me, it's somebody else with a similar name, I can sue you if you're a newspaper and get a lot of money from you because I'm nobody and I'm not somebody out trying to get publicity. Whereas politicians and movie stars and people like that can't hardly sue at all because they're such public figures and they're seeking publicity. And so you can make mistakes with them and not get sued. You can't make mistakes with Ken Harvey, who's a nobody, and say that and basically inadvertently tell a lie about me without being sued if I want to sue you. And the other thing about it is that libel is only a civil thing. So I can get money out of you, but I can't send you to prison. Nobody can send you to prison for lying about them. They can get money from you. They can't send you to prison. And that's the other thing about developing countries. When you start looking, one of the main things about journalism freedom is whether or not somebody can send you to prison for what you write. You can write anything you want to in America. You can't be sent to prison. Well, there might be a few. I mean, if you're actually, I don't know, it would be real. There's one little aspect by the Supreme Court that you can't yell fire in a crowded theater is the principle. You can't do something that endangers a bunch of people's lives. So there's a very small facet where if you did something, and it's hard to do in a printed newspaper, to yell fire in a crowded theater. So it's hard to imagine something you could do in a newspaper for which it would fall under that rule, that you can do something that so incites a panic or something that you should be criminally liable. I can't even think of a case where newspapers, anybody in the newspaper business has been sent to jail for any of that. There is another small loophole, so to speak, where some journalists have gone to jail, and that's when in some states you're not protected. If you try to protect your sources, you're not protected. And so if you go into a courtroom in some states, not all the states, it differs from state to state, and the prosecutor asks you to reveal who told you that Joe Schmo murdered the guy, whatever, and they say, and you try to say, well, well, first off, if there's no protection, I'm a journalist, I can't answer that question. That doesn't matter to them. The only other excuse is I'm under the Fifth Amendment, I don't have to incriminate myself. In other words, I don't have to tell you anything that might send me to prison. But then the prosecutor says, we waive any possibility of you going to prison for this. Now you have to answer us. If you don't answer who your source was, now you can go to prison and tell, as long as it takes until you tell them that who your source was. And so a number of journalists have gone to prison or gone to jail and just sat there for a long time and not revealed their sources because they felt that was their moral obligation. They told a source that they were not going to, they were, tell me this information and I'll protect you. And so they made that promise and they're willing to go to jail for that. So that's about the only place where a journalist can go to jail that I can think of in America. But other than that, it's all civil suits. You pay money if you lie about somebody or something, but you don't go to jail for it. So journalists in America have a lot more freedom. That's why they can say whatever they want to about President Trump or anybody else. The worst thing that happens is they lose money, pretty much. Like I say, the other thing about going to jail is so seldom applied that it's almost non-existent. Okay, blank blank, a Chinese undergraduate now in China University once had numbers of experience attending the extracurricular class, and she thinks it bring a huge effect to her life path. Too vague, way too vague. Two sentences should not be two sentences. Um, Probably again, this could be turned because once you said she thinks, that is, and it makes it indirect quote. Actually, you didn't read her mind. She actually told you this, I presume. So this can be turned into an indirect quote, thus a speech interview lead. The first sentence, you're starting off with the person. You probably don't need to do that. Again, that's not the strongest thing. A Chinese undergraduate at Chaiman probably can be held to paragraph 2 or something. It may, if it's not, at least delay it in that lead. You don't take up the whole first sentence telling people that a Chinese student took an extracurricular class. There's no whammy in that. The whammy in the lead is that she thinks is something more specific about how it changed her life. So the indirect quote might be participating in extracurricular activities at Chaiman University can change your life, says so and so. So you get to the indirect quote, and the point is it can change your life. And so that's the whammy in this. And so you get that into the lead, and then you explain, well, in paragraph 2, or start explaining, or maybe save it for paragraph 3. You probably need to give a little bit of that's still so vague that probably in paragraph 2 you need to give a little more information about how in the world an extracurricular activity changed your life. That you're leaving that, so I mean you're doing it on purpose in that case. You'd still have a whammy that extracurricular activities can be very important to you, and then you're emphasizing by actually, if you use the words can change your life, that makes it even feel a little bit stronger. You want to make it as strong as you can, and then but it's still a little bit vague, and so you probably want to address it a little bit in paragraph 2, but then paragraph 3 with the direct quote will give us some more information, hopefully, and it should do it right away. I can hardly count how many cram school I have went. I don't exactly know what that means. My tutor trip started from my kindergarten. So anyway, we're not getting there soon enough. So you need to get to what changed your life. And again, this is a very long paragraph anyway. Again, 3 paragraphs or 3 sentences maximum. And this one looks like something like 8 sentences here. So find the sentence that really answers the question. How did it change your life? We're too far into the story before we're figuring this out. So this has a lot of potential. It just isn't emphasized, and it's not clear. We need to get to it as quick as possible. In fact, I'm going to, just to make my point, I'm going to copy this slide and rewrite it just to make my point. So I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to put down my mic. See, this person did write a headline. I put it there on purpose, wondering if she or he thought this was the lead, because some of my students in America have gotten confused too between a headline and a lead. So it kind of says what I said the lead should say in this headline. At least I'm presuming this is meant to be a headline. But don't let your headline steal your thunder and then leave it out of the lead. You can't do that. Your story has to be standalone. The editor, certainly in American newspapers, and maybe not in Europe, but probably the editor, even if you write a headline, even if your editor tells you write a headline, when somebody starts using desktop publishing to put all the stories together in a page, I don't know how many of you have taken editing, but anyway, you have to make things look nice on your page. And very frequently you have to change. You may start with one headline. You have to start changing that headline to make it fit so that it's big enough, as big as you want it to be, and fits in the space you have in your on your page. And so even if your editor tells you write a headline, you cannot presume that headline is going to be the last headline. You know that is definitely going to be the headline used because the page hasn't been laid out yet. Any newspaper that will absolutely use your headline no matter what is a really bad newspaper. They have no idea of newspaper design if they're going to let you write the headline and not change it. That'd be ridiculous, because you need. I mean, sometimes if the writers write the headline, we might be able to use some of the headline, and that makes the editor's life a little bit easier to have a headline written for them. Although it can kind of be a trap sometimes too, because once an editor reads a headline, he can kind of get that stuck in his mind, and he has a hard time breaking away from the headline that somebody else wrote for him. And so it can be a little bit of a trap and cause you to write a worse headline because you have one in your mind and you need to get rid of it and start over again. But regardless, it just isn't going to, if he doesn't know yet, I presume, at least in most cases he doesn't, whether this going to be a 1-column story? Is it going to be a 2-column story? Is it going to be a 3-column story? Is it going to be a 4-column story? Whatever width it is going to make a change in what the headline looks like. The wider it is, the wider, if it's 4 columns wide, now the headline can be pretty good size. If it's 1 column, then you're struggling to make those words fit in. And the rule of thumb in America is that if you have multiple lines, more than one line of a headline, all lines should be within 3 characters of each other, which means you're scrambling to make them fit into that column if it's a 1-column a story. So anyway, the editing process is such that any good newspaper has to change headlines. You might ask the reporter, the writer, to write a headline, but should be no guarantee that it's going to show up that way in the newspaper. So your story has to be standalone. You have to start with the lead, with the whammy, and not consider what the headline is going to be at all. Forget about the headline. Just start from scratch. Your lead for your story is, in essence, I mean, that is your waving at people, come read me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the, one thing here. Get rid of the leads or the headline, if that's what it's meant to be. And go ahead and use the lead that I was suggesting. We usually call them activities rather than classes. And you really can hold off Chimon University, especially if it's in a Chimon student newspaper or something, then it's kind of presumed you're writing about the university. In paragraph 2, you can include that. So again, trying to keep it as tight as possible, as powerful as possible. I gave you that analogy of pouring the juice into a cup, and then giving people a glass of juice, and then because I'm running out, I put more water in, and so I then pour some out for this, those in the middle row here, and then I'm running out of juice again, so I put more water in. So by the time I get over here, nobody wants to drink the juice because it's mostly water. You do the same things with words. If you use words that are not flavorful, if you might say, if they have no meaning, if they have no power to them, that means you're diluting that sentence or that paragraph. You're diluting it by putting words in there, including information. Words are information. You're including words and information that isn't very powerful, that maybe you can delay. The information you can delay to another paragraph. This is in a lead. There are exceptions. There are what we call direct address leads, and that's where you do use second person, you. And this is one where I would think about doing that. Instead of you can say can change students' lives. But this was the direct address using the you form is acceptable in the industry, but not very often. You wouldn't use it very often. Here I'm going to use it to make my point. Can change your life because the readers are considered to be mostly students. And so, since it's fairly short already, maybe I will put in a Chinese student. And I think if it's for a student newspaper or student media, you can use the initials, even in first reference. Kind of like, according to Associated Press, FBI, for example, and CIA are so commonly used that actually they're more recognizable to an American than what they actually represent. If you ask an American what's FBI stand for, a lot of them won't know. They know what FBI means, but they don't know that it stands for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. And if you ask them what CIA means, they know what the CIA is. They don't know that it's the Central Intelligence Agency. And so in some cases, some acronyms can be more recognizable than the words they actually represent. And so according to Associated Press, their style book, those are a few of the exceptions. USA, FBI, CIA, but for, you might say, your local style, if it's for a student medium, the initials for China is fine. I would say that should be our style. Why say the whole name of the university when we know what we're talking about here? So that's the lead, short, sweet, powerful. It doesn't answer the question. It asks the question, not in the form of a question, but it raises the question in your mind. How so? I'm going to have to go down, and I think it had to do with dance or something. I didn't read it real carefully. But the next piece of information is down here. In fact, I'm still not sure what changed her life. It's a little bit vague as what changed her life. She liked dancing and stuff, but I don't know. You need to clarify that. So maybe I can't rewrite this because I don't understand it. I don't understand what changed her life. Oops. Here we go again. I can rewrite the lead, but I need to know more about what she's talking about. Well, I'm just going to stop there because it's not clear to me how to follow that up, and I don't know whether it's in the notes or not. Um, but the lead should be something more like that. If you have the content, you can't write a lead and then not have something to follow it up with. And that's another area where let's say you need to be careful in your interviewing that you for sure gather enough information to to follow up on a whammy. So when you're talking to somebody and somebody says something like this, and so in your mind you're saying, that's the lead. That's what I want to follow up. Um, Now you need to ask some more questions to get to the point. So in what way did extracurricular activities change your life? And get her to answer that question very specifically for you. Because if you don't, then you're going to have trouble writing the story. But let's say, as another example, I'm out driving around with the mayor, and he's showing me all the city projects they're working on and telling me how everything's getting better and better, and what a good job he's doing as mayor. And then he tells me something that he shouldn't tell me because now we're buddies, and he doesn't think I'm going to tell the rest of the world. So he says one sentence about that shows that he's I don't like I said I don't even remember what the mayor said that got him in trouble. It's been too long. But let's say he said, "Yeah, I got a special price by giving it to my friend, giving this project to my friend." Well, cities aren't supposed to give public projects to their friends. They're supposed to go through a regular process and not be negotiating something with their buddies. And here, I'll give you this project if you give me a good price. That's not supposed to happen in American government. And so let's say he told me that, and I don't ask any more questions, then I can't write that story because I don't have enough information to write the story about what he said, what he told me that is ethically questionable. I need to follow it up with additional questions. So, I mean, the obvious question ultimately, you might start off with some softer ones. Well, like, who did this project? You want to find out, who got this job because he was your friend. You don't want to tell him that yet. But, you ask a few questions like that, get a few more of the 5 W's before you say, don't you have to go through a regular process? Don't people have to, bid on a project? You can't just give it to them, can you? So you finally get to the crux of the problem that it's illegal just to give it to somebody in American government. You have to bid it out. You have to put it in the newspaper, and anybody who wants to bid on this project can put in a bid that they will do it for this price or that price. You can't just give it to your friend. So if I don't ask those questions, I simply have no material. I don't have those bricks that I need to build the story. And so while you're interviewing somebody, you need to adapt your questions to make sure you have exactly what you need to write your story. So you might, in your mind, in a way, especially if you can think about it logically, I've tried to help you think about how to write your story in a logical way. Then you can almost imagine the story before you, even while you're doing the interview, you can imagine in your mind what you need in order to pursue that angle. Okay, well, there's the whammy. He just told me he gave this project to his friend. Okay, I need this more information. Who's this friend? So now you're looking for paragraph 2 stuff. And so you're asking him a few questions about that doesn't, so far he doesn't know that you're onto his gig here. And then paragraph 3, now you're ready to ask him the hard question about whether or not this is legal. And so you now in your mind, you're almost writing the story as you're asking the question. If you can understand the formula that I've given you on how to write a story, then it makes your interviewing better as well. You can write the story in your head as you're asking questions. Okay, when the college entrance examination, CEE, I guess I had too many E's there, really ends, she suddenly feels that her brain is empty and doesn't know what to do next after a long and intense study time, says so-and-so, a freshman at Chaiman University, Malaysia. The English here is actually, this person had good English. So that's a good thing. And there's an element there that sounds pretty good too, but it's kind of awkward, not real clear exactly what she's trying to say, and quite wordy in trying to say it. So that needs to be tightened, needs to be a little bit, better grammar. Basically, is going to help this a lot. Some of this could. Let's see, we've got probably, this is within the range, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we're almost right at 35 words, real close to it. One thing you can do is not put CEE in the lead. That's a small thing. In fact, you don't have to put the name of it. Although in this case, the name is also descriptive. If the name were not descriptive of what it was, then I'd be tempted to try to shorten it up. But the name is reflective of what it is you're taking, so it's good. So CE isn't going to delay you very long, or take that many words or letters away from the lead. Nonetheless, actually, it's AP style, Associated Press style, not to put in parentheses the CE, the acronym. You don't need that. And so what Associated Press says is next time just go ahead and put in the initials, that they will figure out what CEE is next time you refer to it. Anyway, it doesn't say that much here, but that is the AP style. They're trying to shorten things up. Maybe saying something like as she completed the college entrance exam, so-and-so felt like her brain was totally empty, she says. Make it a little bit better grammatically. But now you need to follow up on that. What does that mean? And I don't... you need to get in there as quick as possible and explain that. That again is quite vague. Her brain is empty. What does she mean by that? It might be, in fact, some paragraphs too, especially when you're talking about when you're doing an interview like this, especially a single interview, you may not need much of a paragraph two. You may not need any paragraph two in the sense, you have a paragraph two, but as far as being the complete lead, there's so little information you need to add that you really don't necessarily need to have a second paragraph totally dedicated to the 5 W's. And I think that may be the case here. One way of doing that is once you've named her in paragraph 1, is now in paragraph 2 say, maybe go to the quote, students who take the CEE in Shandong, like me, will have more pressure from the competition than students in other regions, says the 18-year-old Chinese student. So I already named her in paragraph 1, so now your attribution in paragraph 2 can be descriptive, the 18-year-old Chinese girl. And so that, in essence, adds some 5 W's without actually taking a full paragraph to do it. You know that you already said in paragraph 1 that she was a Chaiman student, a Chaiman freshman. So you already have quite a few of the 5 W's in paragraph 1 if you keep that there. And so what we need to know is where she's from, how old she is, whatever. And so you can actually go into an indirect quote there, or a direct quote even. Go straight to a direct quote. So that's kind of breaking what I suggested for you to do. But if you don't have a lot of 5 W's to put in paragraph 2, that's okay. So that would, I think, with this, in order to get to the point where it's kind of vague, I feel like my brain was going to explode or whatever. Um, Getting to a quote is quite appropriate, um, because you're answering this. You've raised a question in the lead, and now you need to answer that question as quickly as you can. Why did she feel like well, she said, yeah, brain was empty. In America would probably say her brain felt like it was about to explode or whatever. So you can go straight to find that quote that tells what she's getting to, and there's too many quotes here that don't say anything. Um, so jump all the way down to that last one in paragraph 2, and change it just slightly, or just maybe cut out the first 2 words there. Students who take the CE in Shandong, like me, have more pressure from the competition, da da da, says the 18-year-old Chinese girl. And so really at that point, you are already into the body of the story. And that is, like I said, for stories like this that are interview stories, especially if they're about one person. When you start doing your story, your project 2, you're interviewing 2 people, and I kind of suggested they should be maybe the best thing is to have them disagree with each other. Now that's really that's not a personality profile there anymore. That's an issue-oriented story. If you get 2 people disagreeing with each other for your project 2, is it possible to do a project 2 without making an issue out of it? Yeah, you could. You could still make it a profile, and then your second source is his chairman or his student or somebody. Not going to be as good a story, but yeah, it's possible to do project 2 without making it an issue-oriented story. But regardless, if it's if it's largely based on one interview, especially, then your paragraph 2 doesn't need to contain as much information as I kind of demonstrated here. So again, showing what I would do. Again, you can you can modify your quotes slightly like this. We're just taking out 2 words, so we're just starting the quote a little bit further along. If we just stop it there, and then down here, So basically that would be the first two paragraphs there. But we still have some of the 5Ws remaining in paragraph 2, but it also has the direct quote. So it's kind of a combination of what I would typically have in paragraph 2 and 3. We have a direct quote leading into the body of the story, but we also included some more of the 5Ws without making it separate sentences. So frequently, as part of your attribution, you can fit in information that some of you are making separate sentences for. You can just add it as part of the attribution. So you don't need a separate sentence to say that she's an 18-year-old Chaiman freshman. You can put that in as part of the attribution. Okay, adjusting to a new environment is never easy. So-and-so is now facing the challenge of cultural differences even as he attends university in his homeland. Again, we have two sentences here that would not be that hard to combine. But the first question is that really the lead? And in fact, it may be. Again, these other paragraphs are too long. We have 4 in the second paragraph here. We've got 4 or 5 in the third paragraph. So again, keep them shorter than that. And also, I mentioned before in class, I try to put one way I divide paragraphs is whether or not there's a direct quote or not. So I automatically put a return there. I don't put an indirect quote and the direct quote in the same sentence, in the same paragraph, I mean. The second sentence, the second paragraph, actually there's something interesting to it. So in trying to, let me, without changing it, rewrite this one too. The concept, I think, is here. Adjusting to a new environment is never easy, says so-and-so. Something like who is now facing the challenge of cultural differences. We might be able to leave it pretty much like it is. But maybe save that for paragraph 2. Who is now facing the challenge of cultural differences, even in his own homeland. Made what may have been the most important decision of his life last September when he dropped out. There's a little bit of bad grammar here. Out of one of China's top 10 universities. I think kind of wording here. Universities to attend. and we know where we're at, so to attend. So there's no point taking a valuable space for something we already understand, that it's a branch of a Chinese university. But we still maybe want to here maybe calls for a compound sentence. Or what was he surprised by? He was surprised to feel almost like a foreigner here. Maybe something like that. So this one, I think there's that paragraph might have something valuable later, but it's not here. It's too vague. We need to get to the point here. So this sentence here might be okay. Maybe since I already introduced that he's feeling a little strange, maybe just things, the but isn't necessary. Things don't seem to be going as well as expected. Again, from his perspective, it'd be more like are not going as well as expected. So-and-so admits, oops. That could go back up into paragraph 2. So we start off with that, with the quote in paragraph 3. One of the things that a lot of you did was you put lots of attribution into the same paragraph. Usually you only need one attribution in the paragraph. Sometimes you can put the name and the pronoun. So like he admits whatever, or she admits. And sometimes it's needed, but I saw some paragraphs where you said use the name like literally 5 times in one paragraph as attribution. That's not necessary. You need to make sure it's clear who's saying it, but usually as long as every paragraph has a different source, you don't have 2 sources. Again, you don't have 2 sources in one paragraph, hardly ever. Avoid that. And then secondly, and then one attribution can usually be all you need in each paragraph. Some of you had way too much attribution. I want attribution, but I want clear attribution, but I don't want wordiness. So there's a difference. So now we're looking for the quote. So we're going to get rid of this part and start with this quote. Paragraph 3 was what I asked you to do, and there's a decent quote there for that. I try to avoid phrases like this. Several of you made a phrase, used a phrase like this when asked whether he had confidence. Avoid that sort of, when asked this question. Instead, you use an indirect quote to suggest. You just go into the response. You don't tell what the question was unless it's really an absurd question. And so by saying more or less, when asked that, you're basically feel like you're having to tell the reader what questions you ask. And usually it's not necessary. Usually there's no reason, because your answer implies what the question was. And so having to tell the reader what the question was, directly or indirectly, is almost never, ever necessary. Like that's again once in 1,000 stories. You need to tell them the question. Um, and so instead of that, you use it as an indirect quote. Um, so in this case, the question is, when asked whether he had confidence to handle the relationship with new classmates, he smiled helplessly. It's hard, but I'll try. Um, that's probably best just to turn the whole thing into an indirect quote, or you can even there's nothing wrong with a really short. Again, even with this, I would make if I wanted to use that quote, I would make it a separate paragraph. My rule is never put a direct quote and an indirect quote together. I would make this. You don't do it very often, but there's actually nothing wrong. In fact, again, trying to help your story breathe, so that it doesn't look, the paragraphs don't look too foreboding and so forth. Having a really short paragraph once in a while is nice. It's not bad. It's unusual, and you don't do it very often. But I keep my rule anyway. So this paragraph, I'd have an indirect quote, and this one I'd have a very short direct quote in as a separate paragraph. So this one ends up being. So instead of saying what the question was, you're saying, and again, you might put it in the same. I'm not saying I never would put it in the same paragraph. Um, can't talk and type at the same time. That's kind of what the question and response implied. Um, and then whether you keep it a separate one or put it in the same one, it's so short that I might break my rule and make it one paragraph, because also the indirect quote is also quite short at that point. So maybe in this case I would put them in the same. Um, and in this case I might, where it says he says here, or maybe just take out the attribution at the start. We put the attribution at the end anyway. So, oh no, we're going to say. So he's not sure whether he will be able to overcome the challenge. It's hard, but I'll try, he says. Well, maybe, or maybe even make your type 3 and put it in here. And so your first part of your type 3 paragraph is an indirect quote, and your second part is a direct quote. Yeah, I actually like it better the way it was. Okay, so something like that. Um, Again, the materials there just needs to be. Um, oh, I jumped from one. My PowerPoint jumped from one to another here. So, okay, where am I at here? Go back here. Oh, I guess I'm at the right place. Okay. Okay. Well, we're obviously I didn't have a chance to go through all of them. There were some that were quite good. Some of them I don't know much about, so I wasn't even sure how to look at them. I don't, but Well, this one, I think there's good material in it. People with different personalities may be troublesome, but it's another case to so-and-so who knows how to deal with them and wishes to help those in need. I think the main problem with this is the lead doesn't lead exactly. It doesn't exactly explain how she deals with people with a troublesome personality. It does say she considers their personal value, but make sure the lead leads, that the lead leads you to where you want to go. Because I don't quite feel this one leads into the other information provided here. It's kind of related, but not exactly. This one, there was, of course, had a good subject here, write about somebody interesting, but again, too long of paragraphs. I need to cut those paragraphs down. And just tried to say too much. It was more than the assignment. The assignment was write 3 to 5 sentences. And so this one has 20 sentences. And made it harder than it needed to be. And it's a little vague. As soon as I did, he left. Yeah, I said that, but that is very vague to somebody who's that you're trying to interest into read me phase of the story. You need to, if you're going to have that, you need to explain what it means real quickly. What it refers to is that I came here to Chaiman because a friend of mine was working here, and as soon as I came, he left. And so there may be a way to say that in a lead, but this is a little bit a long way to say it. You need to say it very quickly, and that's possible to do. Again, this one has potential to it. Some grammatical problems here. Has never given up his aspirations to be part of a starting lineup in his club. Be careful of saying things. He is undoubtedly a hardworking and persistent footballer. Why is it undoubtedly? Do you know that for a fact? I'm not saying he's not, but it's not undoubtedly. There are a lot of people that join a team who are not hardworking. And so be careful about assuming that responsibility as a writer, that you're saying somebody is something. He's undoubtedly. Why is he undoubtedly? I doubt it. I doubt it. No, maybe I don't. But you get the point. Be very careful about use of adverbs and adjectives in describing somebody. Do you really know that this is true? And if you do know it, on what basis can you explain that to your readers that you know it? In which case, give the information. Don't use the word undoubtedly. And you kind of have, the writer here does have some information that suggests that, but it really doesn't prove it. Well, we're out of time, but anyway, so some things to grow from here. First off, make sure you ask good questions to get good answers. Try to find something newsworthy. Try to emphasize that element in the lead. Keep your leads and all your paragraphs short, but your lead to one sentence. Figure out a way to express what you want to express in your lead with one sentence, and make sure it's powerful. Make sure it's the most interesting thing that you found out from the person you interviewed. You want to make sure that this, again, your lead is what's telling people, come read me, come read me. And if it's not doing that, if it's not the most interesting stuff you have in your story, then you're not doing your job. You need to find something interesting. And if you don't have it because you haven't asked good questions, you haven't done your job. And so you need to work harder at that. Make sure your leads are strong, that they're interesting, they call people's attention to your story. Make sure you've asked the right questions so you have the material to back it up. If you're into an interview and you really have nothing interesting, well, that's a problem, obviously. And you may even ask somebody, what makes you different than anybody else? Ask some questions like that. And this story does suggest that maybe the question like that, what's the thing that you get most excited about? And so this does get to that information. It gets that information. It's just not. It could use some rewriting on it, and it could maybe use a few more quotes. And so again, if you don't get the quotes you want, ask some more questions to get the quotes you need. You need to be thinking about your story as you're asking your questions. Again, almost in a sense, writing it in your mind as you're asking questions, and understanding what you need to build the house, so to speak. What bricks you need to build the house, and make sure you have them before you end your interview. You need a whammy. You need the whatever other 5 W's that are important to the story for paragraph 2. Typically, you need a strong quote. You need to make sure that the whammy you're going to use in the lead, that you have enough information to tell the rest of the story, to explain it to people. And so if you have a really, if in your mind you're going to use a very vague lead, that's dangerous to do. So I would, again, what I suggested was make sure you have a strong direct quote that's really interesting, and then turn that direct quote, use the information in the direct quote to make an indirect quote out of your lead, and that's your lead. An indirect quote, in other words, your words, kind of summarizing what the person said in the really good quote you have, and save that quote for paragraph 3. But in your own words, you're using it in paragraph 1 as the thing to catch people's attention in your words. But then in paragraph 3, you have that direct quote, that's really good direct quote, sitting there waiting for you. You need to make sure you have that direct quote. You have a good, interesting direct quote, because it's going to be used in 2 paragraphs. You're going to use it to be your lead as an indirect quote, and you're going to use it again in paragraph 3 to be a fuller, more complete direct quote, with quote marks around it. And so making sure you have some good direct quotes, and that's why I was challenging you to get as many direct quotes as possible, because that's the easiest way for you to write this story that I've assigned you to do. If you have some good direct quotes, then you can follow that formula pretty easily. Find the one that's most interesting, use it first as your indirect quote, as a speech interview lead, like I was showing you earlier, wherever that's at. Maybe I closed it. Oh, here it is. So here again, this is what what a speech interview lead looks like. The internet has totally changed the way professionals conduct modern marketing, says Chime Professor Ken Harvey. So that's what it looks like. I took a direct quote, turned that into an indirect quote as a speech interview lead. That's your first sentence, if you have a good quote. If you don't have a good quote, then you don't have a good first sentence. And so you start off with that, and then you fill in other information if you need it. Like I said, in this case, your paragraph 2 you may even be able to kind of combine paragraph 2 and 3 into one, in a sense, in that your paragraph 2 may not have a lot of 5 W's to have to cover. And so maybe you can put a direct quote even into paragraph 2, or another indirect quote. But anyway, by the time you're ready to go into your body of your story, then that's where you plunk in the direct quote that you used already as an indirect quote for paragraph 1. But now your direct quote should be more interesting in the sense of, I mean, the using it as your speech interview lead is the, here, come read this. Using it in paragraph 3, it has more words in it, has more information in it, has more personality in it, has credibility in it, because now you have exactly his words, so now it has more credibility. You're saying this is exactly what this person said, not my version of it, but his version of it. And so if you have a really strong direct quote like that, paragraph 3 then starts off the rest of your story real nicely, and you're ready to go. Then you're just weaving back and forth between indirect quotes, what he thought and what he said directly, and just weave back and forth. But hopefully you can, like I say, get some good, strong, direct quotes for your stories. And if you, in this case, for your project 2, I'd suggest you use a tape recorder because your grade depends so much on it. It's worth quite a bit of your grade. So I would use a recording device, and so you definitely have some direct quotes. But then the challenge is to make sure you ask good questions, so you have good direct quotes. And of course, here this was kind of unfair in that I'm having you interview each other, and each other may be boring. Now you get to choose who you interview for project 2. So will help me to help you do a better job, because it's a more interesting subject than just randomly grabbing somebody and asking them some questions. So that'll be better. Any questions? We're out of time. Any questions? Okay. Well, maybe we'll try this again while I'm still teaching the class, so that you may see how you do in another experiment. Maybe you go out and do a man in the street. Just go out and talk to somebody about a subject. So you have an issue, so you can go out, I'll give you 30 minutes to go out and just go talk to people. What do you think about, the American-Chinese trade war, whatever? And just go ask a few people, and then I'll have you write a few paragraphs on that, just again to see if you're getting the idea a little bit better. Okay, but we'll do that. Next week I won't be here because you have your Wednesday is your holiday, and Thursday then Godzilla will be here to listen to some reports. So she'll be in charge of class. So I'll see you the following week. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Oh. Again, there's the regular attendance, and if you have lunch time for your makeup day, back in lesson 5, please sign this one. Recording here.